Welcome to Knocking to 10, the podcast for go-to-market leaders scaling from 0 to 10 million and beyond. I'm John DiLoretto, founder of Knock2. Each week, I sit down with founders, operators, and go-to-market leaders to pull back the curtain on what's fueled their success and the hard-earned lessons they've picked up along the way. New episodes drop weekly. Subscribe to follow along. Welcome back to Knocking to 10. I'm John DiLoretto, founder of Knock2. I interview sales and marketing leaders to give you the inside scoop on what it means to go from 0 to 10 million plus in revenue. Today, I'm joined by John Descalzi, an absolute legend in the sales leadership world. John Descalzi cut his teeth in private equity, moved on to leading a commercial real estate firm, then led a customer success function for a global software company, and now currently serves as VP of Commercial at Flipdish, a restaurant technology platform where I had the privilege to work with John for a number of years. John Descalzi, thanks for joining us today.
Nice. I don't know what I can tell you that you haven't already taught me, John, but I'll do my best.
Well, let's see, what else? John Descalzi also won a heralded prize at the Dartmouth College for one of the best essays ever produced there. And I believe he did his secondary school at a small safety school called the DeBarton School in New Jersey. Is that right?
For boys, yes, that's correct.
Anyhow, John, it's good to have you here. It's always fun to talk to guests that are actually friends and we've had the chance to work with over the years. So, John, in your current role, you're leading all things commercial in Flipdish, but you've seen a number of different roles there. You were first hired to build out their customer success function. So we'll touch on that. And we're also going to touch a little bit on your experience leading a team across both Europe and the US and some of the changes that have happened over the years. But first things first, let's hop into our first topic. When you were hired at Flipdish, what I believe at that time, we'd just done a pretty big round, right? What did we just raise, the $100 million round?
Yeah, we raised our Series C at the very end of 21. I was hired at the beginning of 22 to help you with the US go-to-market. And I think we had a capacity plan for something like 50 roles in the US at the beginning of 22, and 50 went to 5, and then 5 went to me and you, presenting to the executive leadership team as to why we should not exit the US entirely. And I think they said, okay, this makes a lot of sense, but we're still going to focus on Europe. We like you guys though, so if you want a home at Flipdish, you have to work on the European business. And that really began, I guess, the rest of my journey at the company.
Well, do you remember at the time what the kind of revenue targets were when it was growth at all costs? Was it doubling, tripling? What was it year over year that we're focused on?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a different model, because the way that Flipdish was going to market then was they were kind of seeding launch teams in a number of different countries, some of which, worked out, kind of found localized product market fit in Spain and the UK and Ireland, to a certain extent in the US, but didn't find that in other geos. And I think that as an online ordering platform with kind of a horizontal international expansion strategy, we just found we were going kind of too broad and not deep enough. We couldn't maintain product market fit within that niche. So the firm kind of retooled, acquired a point of sale company, reinvented itself as an all-in-one restaurant management system, and has been trying to go much deeper into not just the front of the house and the relationship between the restaurant and its consumers digitally, but all the way into the back of the house with kitchen operations, in-store payments, dine-in and online service. And that's really been our focus for the last 18 to 24 months.
Yeah. When you think back to that phone call we had where we kind of presented the option to, continue on in certain markets or to consolidate, obviously there's been quite a bit of changes since then. What are some of the biggest shifts that had to occur, maybe across a personnel, a capital deployment, team structure, that have happened to kind of make this big shift from growth at all costs to being efficient?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of them. I think the first big change was like, how do we deliver kind of hardware and software into like a real environment? I think it's quite easy to, turn on a website, create a menu in an online environment, start helping restaurants serve their customers there digitally. But as soon as you're inside of the store, you're running cable, you might need to get them to purchase stronger Wi-Fi that they don't have. You're drilling holes in walls. That's a completely different game, like operationally. So we had to create a bunch of roles that didn't exist, like field installation, for example, which is a huge part of how we go to market, and really understand, okay, how can we deliver at a really high level of service at a cost that is still attractive for an SMB client that doesn't have a huge amount of margin to be spending on tech and expensive implementations every single month. I think the other like big learning is probably around going from like a regionally distributed model where GMs had a lot of freedom to kind of invest as they saw fit within a geography. Like we had a lot of leeway when we were focused on the US to create, a business case for a specific role for the US that didn't exist in Ireland, that didn't exist in the United Kingdom. But when we decided to go kind of narrow and deep in the UK and Ireland as a point of sale company, we also centralized commercial operations. So we moved from kind of regional GMs to, VP of commercial, a director of sales, more of a conventional kind of SaaS company setup, which I think was also kind of like it would be very hard to be able to get a strong grip on, CAC, payback, or like how we allocated budgets to different lead gen costs and build a really efficient machine without that centralized model and the ability to, I don't want to say like command and control. That's a bit too strong, but have a much more like rational, leaner org with much faster decision making.
Okay, so there are three things going on here. So one, there was the macro pressures in general of just cut back spending. Two, there was this idea of saying we're going to transform as a company and we're going to go very deep. And then three, this idea of not only are we going to do that, but we're going to entirely reorg how we go to market and our management structure. All three happening at once. Was there like a chicken and the egg thing? Did one lead to the others?
Well, I think like when you do an acquisition, I think like the first thing you do is kind of figure like, okay, what does post-merger integration look like? And the big decision that happened initially was like, do we start going to market with the point of sale, or do we work on integrating the two services perfectly? Build out the org perfectly, kind of slowly roll it out with beta or pilot customers. And we made the decision to kind of go to market basically immediately and learn as we go. And I think part of that was offensive. We knew we had a head start on some of the more like the global platforms that we thought were going to be entering our market, and we were soon kind of going head to head against. And part of it was defensive, because candidly, like there's 45 online ordering providers in like every single city you want to compete in, and there's not a very big moat around someone's like online presence. It's really easy to rip and replace a website, to redirect a domain, to change the link on a Google business page. And we knew if we were actually inside of the restaurant, like I said, if we were physically laying cable, it was going to be much harder to replace us. And like our revenue retention curves, I think, reflect that. They're just much stronger for our point of sale and multi-product customers than they are for our online ordering customers.
It's a mixture of offense and defense. Something's got to give. Like, you just spend a hunk of money on buying this thing. Need to take it to market. Customers are demanding it. We also know customers are going to churn if we don't put it in place. But we're also facing the reality that like we're not going to be able to operationalize this in 7 different countries at once. We just don't have the capacity or the teams to pull this off. So in hindsight, would you do things any differently?
I think I think in hindsight, I probably would have focused more on the technology integration before we went to market, just because like an inconsistent user experience when you're like merging two different portals with a customer in a restaurant that is like generally like low tech IQ, right? They don't spend a lot of time working behind computers. They're just as likely to have, like a spatula in one hand as they are to be, like on a laptop. So you really need to like make the technology dead simple, and reduce the change management burden, particularly on staff. Like staff training is a huge component of what we do. And if it's not simple for staff, and staff turnover is really high, so you're constantly having to retrain, then, like change management of moving between systems can really impact your customer relationship. So I think we probably under indexed on that initially, like took our lumps, but I think like what the benefit was that we learned how to sell point of sale. So like in those first 6 months, and if you look at like the average number of point of sale deals per rep, 6 months, 12 months later, you're talking about like 3 or 4 times the sales productivity, and we wouldn't have been able to enable the team as well if they were not getting reps in the market talking about point of sale in those first few months. So as with all things, like it's a trade-off, and hindsight is 2020. But like net, I think the investment decision certainly paid off.
Yeah. How do you go about upskilling like an entire sales team that knows nothing about this new product that you just acquired? And not to their own fault, just the reality of, many of these people have been selling a completely different solution for years.
Yeah, I think like in our case, it wasn't like going from like 0 to 1, because a lot of our like customer acquisition motion depended on point of sale integrations. So there was still like a general working knowledge of the point of sale landscape, how our customers were interacting with those platforms. Oftentimes, as like our menus are actually hosted inside of the point of sale and not inside of our solution. So like even things as granular as like how does a menu structure in one point of sale translate to the menu structure in Flipdish? Like all of that was domain knowledge that already existed inside of the business. But and I know you wanted to talk a little bit about like customer success transitioning from like a more of a support and service oriented function to a revenue function. But I remember the first call that I had with the global success team, where I was introducing the idea that they were going to have a revenue target put on their head for the first time, which was obviously an extremely scary call for the team. And I think the thing that made the difference was like we made a corporate commitment to them to say, you're not in this alone, and there's a product and marketing team that is going to be focused on generating customer interest with dedicated campaigns into the customer base. You're not going to be responsible for all of your own lead gen. There's a sales enablement and a product education function that's going to put together, like a 6-week intensive boot camp focused not just on, features, benefits, value props, the competitive landscape, how to handle common objections around, payment processing rates in store, et cetera. And then also a partnerships team that was going to constantly feed us with additional products that we could actually commercialize, so that they always had sources of upsell revenue. They weren't just kind of peddling one thing all the time. And like ultimately, it was probably the follow through on that commitment that gave the team a lot of confidence to invest in themselves, invest in that process, and ultimately see the results. But I do think if you were going to do that and just say, like here's the price book, like go talk about it, like the results wouldn't have been there. It was really a cross-functional effort across a lot of different departments in the business that kind of turned folks that hadn't sold shoelaces before into folks that consistently exceed their targets every month.
Okay, so sort of this multi-tiered approach. You provide training, you're providing like abundance of deals in the terms of like partners, referrals, et cetera. And on top of that, you're also giving people a lot of options, where, you know, the conversations are not binary. They've got an opportunity to have real discovery with their customers, and they've got a couple different things to bring to the table. So they're not just, you know, selling one option. They can really go in holistically, have a conversation with customers about their challenges, and then solution problems for them, or solution or
100%. I think like there's a lot of companies think about like, is sales better positioned to sell into the base, or is success better positioned to sell into the base? And, you know, the folks that go with success, I think, you know, all agree that like not only does success like hold the relationships, but they have the customer understanding of like, where are the pain points in the business? What are, you know, this owner's kind of unique goals for their brand? Are they trying to open, you know, like new customer locations? Are they trying to, you know, are they struggling with labor costs? We need to get a grip on that. And like, that's the key to unlocking an opportunity, right? If there's no pain, there's no opportunity. And the people that have the insight into the pain is the customer success rep. And you know, training folks on objection handling, how to run kind of, you know, a multi-threaded sales process, all of that is very, very trainable. But what's not trainable is, you know, having a stranger in the form of a sales rep, you know, like show up on some customer and they say, well, no, I'm used to talking to Gary, you know, like who are you? I know Gary, I trust Gary. He's been advising me for the last 6 months. He's been helping me expand my business. I don't want to buy from you. I want to buy from the person that I trust. And I think with like SMB retail, you know, generally, in like like what is honestly a pretty commoditized market, like trust is the currency that our customers transact in. You know, they don't buy necessarily from the suppliers that offer the lowest prices. They buy from suppliers that they trust are going to be with them over a long period of time, that they enjoy buying from.
Yeah. So is it fair to say a rep that owns the relationship is better positioned to have success than one that might be the most like technically trained on the product?
I think that's probably right, but I also think like I'm talking about, you know, like our business and our products, and I can definitely see where like products that like are more technically complex, where you're always, you know, bringing a sales engineer into a conversation. Like obviously you need to kind of meet the customers where they are, and you need to align your motion, you know, to those parameters. But I think in our case, like even point of sale is a pretty high velocity transactional sale. You know, like and it was, we just saw way more traction when they were talking to the folks they already knew and trust versus folks that might ultimately be better sellers, but like I said, we're kind of strangers to the buyer.
So rewind about, I don't know, 2-3 years ago, you come into the business, probably what, 95% of all revenue comes from the sales team. And then today, what is
I think it'd probably be more like, like 95% of new revenue. Today it's like 70-30.
So 70 new business, 30% upsell,
That's
new products, et cetera. Cool. Okay. So we touched on success transitioning really from a support function into being a revenue function. Talk to me a little bit about how both the success team and now as you see it in your role as VP of Commercial, how you're going about winning in what is a very commoditized market. So in the US, people are probably familiar with companies like Toast, Square, Lightspeed, you name it. How do you build a go-to-market strategy where you might be undercapitalized compared to some larger incumbents, where you can win customers consistently?
Yeah, well, I think it starts with like, you know, understanding your ICP, and making sure you're playing in a space that you think you do have some advantages. So like in our case, we're focused on delivery focused quick service restaurants with less than 20 locations. And the reason that that's our ICP is, you know, like our heritage and our product depth is still in kind of our digital ordering suite. It's our websites, it's our mobile apps, it's our kiosk solutions, it's our loyalty and retention programs that have really proven over a very long horizon the ability to drive, you know, repeat order volumes, increase AOVs over time, and make a real impact on kind of the D2C component of our restaurant partners' GMV, and going to market as, like an all-in-one restaurant management system today. Like, the legacy components of our product set are really the differentiators at the actual point of sale. So that's point one. I think like point two is probably just making sure that you have like really sustainable sources of pipeline for your reps. I think it's really hard to ramp, and maybe just for a little background, like we've got an inside sales team that's mostly working inbound. It's all performance marketing driven. And we found that, demand gen through paid channels is quite an effective source of revenue for us. And we can spread like pretty significant lead volumes over a relatively small team.
Yeah.
That carries a significantly higher target than our field sales team. But on the field sales side, it's quite difficult to tell a rep, hey, 100% of your target is going to come from pipeline that you are going to generate through cold walk-ins all on your own, right? It's much better to say, we're going to be able to deliver you a certain amount of pipeline through inbound, a certain amount of pipeline through channel partners, but you're still going to have to hit a certain amount of cold walk-ins every single week if we're going to be confident in your ability to hit targets. So it's really probably, like understanding your like the cost dynamics across the different sources, but also understanding like the physics of your sale and like what is the limitation in terms of like how much a rep can generate outbound reasonably within like a time frame that they're going to be continuously motivated to support, and like setting kind of your targets, your payroll costs, and the profile of the reps you hire like according to those ratios.
Yeah. So really, when you're handing these field reps some supports, you're handing them inbounds, you're handing them partner leads, giving that opportunity to go out, meet those leads who are showing demand, and then to be able to walk next door to their neighbor, so to speak, knock on the door and start those conversations with similar brands in their neighborhood, kind of that look-alike customer base.
Yeah, so like, Toast talks about this a lot, like the flywheel that they start to see once they achieve a certain amount of density in a specific geography. And I think that's very real. And it goes back to the point about, restaurants really like the currency they transact in being trust. Like every high street in the UK and Ireland is going to have a brand that every other restaurant on that high street thinks about as kind of the local market leader. And while there's not real, like, we're not selling to Nando's, right? So there's not going to be a distribution channel for us via some national kitchen supplier that's going to help us unlock opportunities with Nando's. But there are going to be like local network effects that we can exploit through like local suppliers, focusing on who those hero accounts are in a specific geo, and then leveraging that as social proof when we actually walk into the next restaurant. And I think like one of the best cold walk-in tactics you have is, hey, do like Bob down the road? I want to tell you a little bit about how they went from zero, direct online commerce, 100% through the marketplace, paying Deliveroo, Just Eat, Uber Eats 30% every month, to generating 50% of their online volume using Flipdish. Like that's like no owner is going to say no, I don't want to hear about that.
Yeah. So niching down, getting really specific about the customer type, and giving your reps tangible examples where they can walk into any store that looks similar to their current customer base and start that conversation with relatable talking points, pain points, etc., because they're going to hit the same way that their core customers do.
Exactly. But once again, like that only works if you have like a really well-defined and narrowly focused ICP. Because if like you're doing great things for Bob's Burgers, and then you want to get the fine dining restaurant next door to see similar success, they're going to say, I've got nothing in common with Bob's Burgers. I know he's got a great brand. I know he's doing a ton of business online. I'm happy he's making a lot of money, but that's not me.
Yeah. Okay. So John, obviously you have a commercial background, but when you were brought in, you were leading a success function, which you talked about your experience of taking it from what was predominantly a support-based function to being one that drove revenue. Talk a little bit about maybe some advice you would give for commercial leaders that sit on maybe the success side or the support side, and what that pathway could look like to growing into a role that is leading commercial or being a chief revenue officer.
Yeah, I think that like the view that success leaders have that sales leaders might not have or tend to neglect because they're always focused on, next month or next quarter's new revenue target is like, everything that happens downstream of the sale and, like the imperative of customer retention. Like it's great if you're smashing your new business numbers, but how you're, retaining that business over time is really what great companies are made of, and there's very few 9 and 10 figure businesses that aren't driving a lot of growth with greater than 100% net revenue retention. So yeah, I think like just being sensitive to the customer experience post sale and how decisions made by reps or onboarding teams upstream of that phase of the customer journey impacts your ability to invest in relationships and expand accounts is really, really important.
So you're essentially the accounts you bring on today may make up 50% of your revenue tomorrow if you put the right inputs in.
Yeah, that's right. And I think what like we found, and I'm gonna like encapsulate this in the phrase like take the high ground or the high ground takes you. Like your best reps, in my experience, are often reps that have the highest churn rates. And it's very telling when you evaluate reps, not just on their sales productivity, but on how well you're retaining whatever that like first month revenue cohort was over time. And I think one of the things that we found is that some of the people that we really thought were top performers over a longer horizon were not the ones that were really driving durability in our business. And if you're a success leader and can actually evaluate how people are selling in a way that is causing you retention problems downstream, and adapt your sales process, how you pitch, how you price, how you objection handle, how you hand over in a really disciplined way to your onboarding or your success teams. Like if you can change that at the like the top of the funnel, your business is going to be much, much better for it.
Yeah. What were a few of the things that you were looking for that demonstrated, I guess I would say, a sale that had high probability of being a long-term customer? When you were you're looking at the cohorts of customers in their first few months, what are some of the indicators that you were looking for that would sort of indicate that this is going to be a good long-term customer and that we sold them correctly and this is a good fit?
Yeah, I would say like the most obvious one is probably like just like interest in more than one product. Like if our core value in some ways is like consolidation of a highly fragmented tech stack, but someone really just wants to like substitute a single solution, like I'm going to add a mobile app, but I'm still happy with my point of sale provider. Once again, like you're not really like building a moat around that customer. They're not bought into like the core value prop that you're trying to make. Yeah, like I talked a little bit about like ICP and just alignment with some of those criteria, but I think at the end of the day, it's like comes back to like the basics that you hear a lot of sales legends like John McMahon talking about. Like if there's no pain, you might convert. You can talk someone to death. You can get them to sign the dotted line, but they really don't have skin in the game, and you have no ability to prove downstream of the sale, hey, this was kind of the current state when we spoke to you 6 months ago. Here's the current state today. These were the success metrics that we agreed were going to prove that Flipdish was working for you during the sale. Look at how much progress we've made today. But yeah, that starts like way upstream of the success journey, and is like really about kind of process discipline, qualification, doing good discovery during the sale.
Yeah. I know at the time we looked at a number of different ways to perhaps motivate through the form of compensation, different ways to have either sales stay on, involved longer, success, handover, et cetera. You've been through a lot of different iterations of frameworks to kind of, build out a functioning team that goes from not just bringing in lots of customers, but retaining them and growing them. Where did you ultimately land on the framework between kind of sales, onboarding, success in terms of engagement? Where do that handoff happens? What are sort of the compensation levers that you look at that sort of motivate the right outcomes?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I would say like the sales commission plan that we were running, like when we acquired the point of sale, was entirely focused on attainment against an MRR target, and 100% of the commission was applied to just month one revenue. Which, I mean, it seems obvious, like what could go wrong with that model in hindsight. But we were just signing up everybody and anybody. We were heavily discounting the subscriptions. The reps didn't care because they could just move on to the next one, wipe their hands of the account, know that they were going to get paid. And we, suffered the consequences in the form of significant early churn in those days. And we moved from that model to having the majority of a rep's commission come from residual commissions on like trailing 6 months of the fees that we make on orders. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Like one, like the orders and the commission we make on those orders is really a sign of usage and adoption, right? Like if you're using multiple products, you're going to be processing orders through more channels. Obviously, 6 months gives you a bit of horizon and causes your reps to think kind of long term and not just about the immediate target attainment. And I think that that made a big difference in like how we qualified during our sales process.
So to translate this into more software terms, you are essentially measuring usage over the first 6 months is how you would comp your reps.
Measuring usage, yeah.
In the terms of orders and fees generated, but functionally usage by your customers over the 6 months is how you aligned your performance compensation.
Yeah, encouraging multi-product attachment, encouraging them to hunt for good customers that were going to drive a significant amount of GMV through our products, and focus less on just signing the next deal and more on signing high quality deals, but also staying engaged in the onboarding experience to make sure that they like go live in a timely fashion and ramp quickly.
Yeah. Okay. Great advice.
I think like just to go back to the initial question though, because it's something that to a certain extent is still like in open debate.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of companies that are in kind of more commoditized markets selling to SMBs have to think about like the more commoditized the space you're in, the less product-led pathways there are to increasing average selling prices or ARPU. So like your sales productivity gains for the most part are going to come from reps being able to sell more deals in a given period than they are reps being able to sell bigger and bigger deals in a given period. So if that's the constraint, I think my argument internally is we need the reps primarily focused on selling and less focused on account management or onboarding responsibilities downstream of the sale. And that to a certain extent, like contradicts the way I just framed the commission model, but you're not going to get the sales productivity gains, I think, like if you don't acknowledge that fact.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, John, I appreciate you coming on Knock 2 today and sharing a little bit about your story and your learnings over the past few years at Flipdish. And thanks for your time today.
Thanks, John. This was fun.